Throughout history, there have been whispers of extraordinary states of consciousness, from enlightenment, Christ consciousness, and other mysterious names. Those who experience these states talk of intimate connections to the universe, transcending time, and even crazy claims of leaving the body. These states have been at the heart of almost all religious and spiritual teachings of the past, yet they've remained a mystery to the average person, making us think that these states are reserved to the chosen few or that they're just magic. However, today, with new scientific and theoretical knowledge, we could be closer to understanding these states, and perhaps even closer to understanding how we could achieve them. In 1895, an Indian man, terrified of his own death, went into a meditative state, hoping to overcome this fear. He contemplated on the question, "Who am I?" and suddenly had an experience that changed his life forever. He described three main sensations in this experience. One, he felt a complete sense that his individual self or his identity dissolved, leaving only a state of pure awareness or consciousness. Two, he felt an overwhelming sense of unity with all existence, not just humans, but all living beings and even the entire cosmos itself. He specified, though, that this experience of oneness was not just intellectual, but a deeply felt realization at the core of his being. And three, his experience felt like it transcended time and space, describing it as a state where past, present, and future seemed irrelevant, and the eternal nature of consciousness became apparent to him. This man's name was Ramana Maharshi, and these characteristics probably sound familiar to you, because they're extremely similar to the accounts of countless others throughout history. Buddha spoke of the individual self dissolving into a state of pure awareness. Tibetan yogi Milarepa spoke of union with all nature. Plotinus, an ancient philosopher, spoke of the union of the individual soul and the universal soul. Hinduism speaks of the idea that the individual self, known as the Atman, is the same as the universal self, known as Brahman. Jesus even said, "I and the Father are one, as well as the kingdom of God is within you," suggesting unity between the self and God, or the universe. Now, the messages will always come in different words, because words are just symbols, but the themes are the same. However, can we use science to help us get closer to understanding what this state really is? When we measure the brainwaves of someone, we can tell whether they're anxious or relaxed. However, the brainwave charts can't describe the richness of our experiences. And this is the limitation of science. So this means that any scientific exploration of personal states, such as enlightenment, are going to be indirect, which means we can't measure someone's experience, but we can measure any physical changes they go through whilst in that experience and compare it to their description of it. In our case, let's look at brainwaves as the signature of our states of being. Now, this is the spectrum of human brainwaves we have available to us. At the lowest frequency range, we have delta waves, which tend to oscillate between 0.5 to 4 Hertz, and is associated with deep sleep and basically any time we're unconscious. Next, we have theta waves. Now, these operate within the frequency range of about 4 to 8 Hertz and are associated with light sleep, so deep meditation, REM sleep, stuff like this. And we spend about 2 to 10% of our waking hours in this state. One above that, we have alpha waves. Now, these range between about 8 to 12 Hertz roughly, and is associated with a relaxed wakefulness, calmness, even light meditation, and about 20 to 30% of our waking hours are spent in this state. The one above this is beta waves. So these range from about 12 to 30 Hertz. Some sources even say that they could go up to 40 Hertz. Now, this is our normal state of being, where we are actively thinking, we are problem solving, we are alert, we are focused. And due to this, we spend about 50 to 70%, sometimes even more, of our waking hours in this state. This is our normal day-to-day state that we are in. However, one above this, the frequency range jumps up dramatically to 30 hertz all the way to 100 hertz. Now, this is a state that we spend less than 1% of our waking hours in, and it's associated with many effects: higher cognitive function, perception, consciousness, peak concentration, and many other things. In fact, in 2004, researchers studied the brainwaves of some Tibetan monks who were highly experienced meditators with over 10,000 hours of meditation experience each. During the monks' meditations, their brains achieved a very high gamma state very consistently throughout. Not just that, but when doing meditations based on the feeling compassion, their brains exhibited new frequencies of gamma brainwaves so high that they had previously been thought impossible. They recorded brainwave frequencies ranging from 100 to 200 hertz, which is 10 to 15 times higher than the average ordinary waking brainwave frequency, and over 6 times higher than the lowest gamma frequency. Now, some people have called this state hyper gamma. And when asked about their experiences during these deep meditation states, they said things like unity with all things, compassion, and a sense of timelessness. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? What was even more fascinating was that even when they were not meditating, the monks exhibited a tremendous amount of gamma brainwave activity too, which had never been found until this. But we've spoken about brainwaves. What about the rest of the body? When we say things like, "I love you from the bottom of my heart," or "you've broken my heart," are they just words we've learned to say or something else? In traditional biology, the heart is a mechanical pump. However, the lesser known aspect of the heart is that it has its own complex nervous system, kind of like a second brain. In fact, some researchers suggest the heart's neural network may contribute to processing emotions independently of the brain. So, it's the combination of these signals between the heart and the brain that largely dictate the state we are in. And metrics like heart rate variability and heart coherence, similar to brainwaves, help us to understand how the body is behaving in altered states of consciousness. But to keep things simple though, science finds that during heightened states of consciousness, more physiological rhythms, including the heart rate, respiratory rate, and brainwave frequencies, tend to synchronize and move more harmoniously together. Now, in Taoism, an ancient Chinese tradition, the concept of the Tao is an effortless, harmonious flow of life that moves through all things within all things. Just as every animal is part of an ecosystem, which is part of the Earth, which is part of the solar system, then the galaxy, the universe, etc., nature works in rhythm. Therefore, we could argue that achieving these elevated states of consciousness is not about magic or supernatural abilities, but about aligning our psychology and our physiology into the synchronized and coherent rhythm of nature. For example, if we look at the difference between the heart rhythm patterns of incoherent emotions like frustration and anxiety compared with coherent ones like appreciation and love, we can clearly see this in action, thanks to the researchers at the HeartMath Institute. This allows us to conclude that the more we engage in these quote-unquote negative emotions, the more disconnected we are from the unity experience, the gamma brainwave state, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. However, if we want to truly understand these higher states, we need to experiment and experience them, not just learn about them. Meditation is the most common tool for this. However, there are a million meditation tutorials out there. Instead, how about we see if there are any external tools we can use to accelerate our ability to get into these states? Now, for this section, I want to explain some science around this, but I also want to show you some theories, as they're pretty fun too. And of all the places, where better to start than with ancient Egypt? Today, most of us look at the pyramids of Egypt with wonder. Their size and precision alone is incredible, and would even be a challenge for us to build today. Whilst there are infinite theories about the purpose of the pyramids, one that is relevant to our discussion about altered states of consciousness involves the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid. Now, for context, the ancient Egyptians had a fascination with sound in their culture. Hymns, chants, and other sounds were an integral part of rituals and spiritual experiences. They believed sound played a key role in helping them achieve spiritual states, and the King's Chamber shows some very unique characteristics. Researchers have studied the acoustics in the King's Chamber. Its geometric design is incredibly precise, with large granite blocks. This combination allows the chamber to resonate at particular sound frequencies, and due to something called the constructive interference of waves, these sound frequencies are amplified too. Now, this amplification is reinforced further by something called standing waves, which is where specific frequencies reflect back and forth between the walls, which creates areas of maximum and minimum sound pressure. Now, in layman's terms, this means that the sound frequencies are amplified even further. In fact, in the pyramid texts, one of the oldest religious texts in the world, it often talks about the pyramid as a structure that facilitates the pharaoh's journey into the afterlife. And it depicts the king's chamber, especially, as a crucial space for this transition. So that's an overview of what we know from the science and historical record, as well as a little bit of theory. But many suggest that the king's chamber acted as an initiation chamber for people looking to accelerate their spiritual ascent, or in modern terms, heighten their states of consciousness. Which brings us to an interesting idea. Could sound frequencies influence our state of being? We already know that our brainwave frequencies are much faster during heightened states, but what if external sounds could help us get there faster? Imagine harnessing sound in a way that influences our state of being directly. The ancient Egyptians may have unlocked these secrets using specific sounds and rhythms to elevate their consciousness. Today, however, in declassified CIA documents, the US government explored the gateway process, which used binaural beats to induce altered states of consciousness and even out-of-body experiences. Binaural beats are where you play two slightly different frequencies in each ear, and the brain waves match the difference between the two frequencies. For example, if I play 300 Hz in your left ear, but 270 Hz in your right ear, your brain will perceive 30 Hz to match the brainwave frequency. So the aim of the gateway process was to synchronize the brain's two sides or hemispheres, helping facilitate deep states of meditation. The use of sound in this way accelerated the meditative process significantly. And after these deep meditative states, the participants described things like expanded consciousness, as though their sense of self dissolves and felt an intense love and peace. This description yet again mirrors the accounts of the countless others throughout history who experienced the same. But this is just the beginning. What could we learn in the future? Perhaps one day we'll be able to map the specific frequencies or combination of frequencies that lead to specific states of consciousness, and perhaps create chambers such as the King's Chamber that amplify the traditional chanting meditations and allow us to achieve the states spoken about throughout history. Maybe we'll even have a device that allows us to sit back and change our state of consciousness on demand, just like a drug, but using purely sound. Maybe the ancient spiritual practices of the past, which have seemed mystical, will be demystified using science, and will have a clear path to a deeper level of existence, and perhaps even to the universe or God or whatever you want to call it. Ultimately, these states are not about achieving some sort of magic consciousness. It's about mastering the art of regulating your state. When you can consciously regulate your emotions and thoughts, you'll be no different from those monks that we looked at, or theoretically the religious people of the past. But unlike the Tibetan monks that were studied with high brainwave activity, most of us don't have 10,000 plus hours of meditation experience, and we don't live the life of solitude that they do, which helps keep their minds quiet and focused. However, they are the extreme. Achieving just a fraction of these super states will improve our experience of life significantly. Imagine being able to regulate your thoughts and emotions consistently. Think of how much more of your life would be in your control, happier, healthier, and with more to show for it. Science has given us a look at how these pieces fit together, as well as how they could fit together. Now it's time to practice. So what do you think is possible?